Hi, I'm Matt Hernandez, and this is Let's Chat Books. Today we're looking at Sherman Alexie's short story, The Lone Ranger and Tonto Fist Fight in Heaven. Now, the interesting thing also with this short story is that it is also the name of a collection of short stories in which this story is featured. I'll do my best to show a picture of the author, Sherman Alexie, here. 54321. And then show a cover of the short story collection. That's not where I got this story. I got it from this one here, the story and its writer, an introduction to short fiction. But I'll try to show a cover of the short story collection, The Lone Ranger and Tonto Fist Fight in Heaven here, 54321. So this is quite the short story, and I will show a page here on the screen as usual. The main character, just as the author, is Native American. The main character of the story, who's nameless, he lives in a reservation near. He lives in a reservation near Spokane, Washington. The character lived in Seattle, Washington, for a while with his white girlfriend, and now he's back living on his own. And then one night, he couldn't sleep. It was too hot for him to sleep, so he decided to go to 7-Eleven and go and get himself a... Oh my gosh, I'll have to read it again. And, okay, just getting a creamsicle. Now, I've never been to Washington, but I wonder, how much does Washington get too hot for one to sleep? I don't know, maybe being from Las Vegas... I mean, and going to sleep enough times without the air conditioning on in the middle of July with the windows open, I don't imagine it gets that hot in Washington, but hey, I could be wrong. I think that it's more about the character just had too much on his mind. Now, an interesting thing also about the story is that as short as it is, I do not believe that this story carries itself all the way by itself. I don't believe that there's so much of that whole story arc and stuff here. But it does serve as a good advertisement to want to pick up the short story collection, The Lone Ranger and Tonto Fist Fight in Heaven, because I wonder, because as I looked that up to make this review, since those stories intersect with each other, I'm curious to see what else happens with this character here. And since there's commonalities in these stories, supposedly, dealing with alcoholism, and the guy in this story, he has some flashbacks with his girlfriend, some of the issues he had with her and stuff, and she asks him if he's drinking, and he claims, or he says, that he has not been drinking for a while. This story also, which would make for a great discussion with you and I, or whoever else, deals a bit with racism. Now, maybe what we could talk about or something is, if we might have ever experienced this, just going to a common, convenience store, such as this character going to 7-Eleven. Now, since part of the story takes place in the reservation and such, there's nothing that I could relate to. I am supposedly like 1/16th Native American, but I mean, I know nothing about anything of that in my family. Yeah, so I do wonder if we could have a discussion with part of this. Okay, then, I'm going to read here on page 15. I'm going to read most of the page, and it is as follows. The graveyard shift worker in the 3rd Avenue 7-Eleven looked like they all do. Acne scars and bad haircut, work pants that showed off his white socks, and those cheap black shoes that have no support. My arches still ache from my year at the Seattle 7-Eleven. Hello, he asked when I walked into his store. How are you doing? I gave him a half wave as I headed back to the freezer. He looked me over as so he could describe me to the police later. I knew the look. One of my old girlfriends said I started to look at her that way too. She left not too long after that. No, I left her, and I don't blame her for anything. That's how it happened. When one person starts to look at another like a criminal, then love is over. It's logical. Okay, flashback. I don't trust you, she said to me. You get too angry. She was white and I lived with her in Seattle. Some nights we fought so bad that I just got in my car and drove all night, only to stop to fill up on gas. In fact, I worked the graveyard shift to spend as much time away from her as possible. But I learned all about Seattle that way, driving its backways and dirt alleys. Sometimes, though, I would forget where I was and get lost. I'd drive for hours searching for something familiar. It seems like I'd spend my whole life that way, looking for anything I recognized. Once I ended up in a nice residential neighborhood, and someone must have been worried because the police showed up and pulled me over. "What are you doing here?" the police officer asked me as he looked over my driver's license and registration. "I'm lost." "Well, where are you supposed to be?" he asked me, and I knew there were plenty of places I wanted to be, but none where I was supposed to be. "I got in a fight with my girlfriend," I said. "I was just driving around blowing off steam, you know." "Well, you should be more careful where you drive," the officer said. "You're making people nervous. You don't fit the profile of the neighborhood." I wanted to tell him that I didn't really fit the profile of the country, but I knew it would just get me into trouble. "Can I help you?" The 7-Eleven clerk, so back out of the flashback. The 7-Eleven clerk asked me loudly, searching for some response that would reassure him that I wasn't an armed robber. I knew this dark skin and long black hair of mine was dangerous. I had potential. "I was just getting a creamsicle," I said after a long interval. It was a sick twist to pull on the guy, but it was late and I was bored. I grabbed my creamsicle and walked back to the counter slowly, scanned the aisles for effect. I wanted to whistle and menacingly, but I never learned to whistle. "Pretty hot out tonight," he asked, that old rhetorical weather bullshit question designed to put us both at ease. "Hot enough to make you go crazy," I said and smiled. He swallowed hard like a white man does in those situations. I looked him over. You know, I think that some of this can make for fascinating discussion. He goes on, he speaks about playing basketball, and then how he was one of the best people maybe in his reservation to play basketball, but then this one white guy beat everybody, including him. I mean, those are things that I could never relate to in any way. I had a phase of my life where I watched more basketball, and it'd be kind of neat if I was here living overseas and if I was the best at martial arts, whether Sanda or BJJ or judo or otherwise. But I do think this is a interesting story. I don't feel that it's so contained to be a complete story all by itself as it kind of stands, but it does make me interested in the rest of this series. So maybe as I go through more short stories, if I ever run out of short stories as I'm currently going through these, maybe I will want to pick up this collection and read the rest of it. Sherman Alexie does appear on the New Yorker podcast, so maybe I will listen to people read his stories or him reading other people's stories as well. Well, I think this video is probably long enough, so have a wonderful day and see you later. Bye.